Welcome in to the training camp practice report brought to you by Safety Insurance. Marc Bertrand today with Bob Socci. Bob, great to see you.
Great to see you, Beetle.
Is this Bob's Bombs? You know, how long do we get into this broadcast before Socci drops one? Zoe comes on, and he drops one in the first 30 seconds. He just starts yelling them out. Guys like us, we'll work them in as we go along. I don't think that they're not just going to blow it now. You got to save up a little bit.
I've got to work myself up to that explosion. And usually our producer, Marc Capello, in our regular broadcast booth during commercial breaks, gets me to that boiling point and beyond.
Yeah.
Marc has just left the building.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to generate, that emotion.
But if he were standing here, we'd turn and tell him to go fuck himself several times during the course of this broadcast just for fun.
I have been on the air, by the way, when somebody has dropped an F-bomb.
Oh, yeah. As have I.
Radio without
we
delay.
have a shared partner, you know. So, yeah. And when that happens, what do? You pretend like it didn't happen.
Drive on.
Well, on this show, you can laugh. But in your position on an actual game broadcast, you just kind of shake it off and keep going. It's too much action to call. So that's, maybe the different approach. But, Bob,
Yes.
we're now, how many days? We're about a week and a half into training camp. Today, for me, felt like, okay, when you start hearing players talk about the dog days of camp, this would have been the first one. This was not the hottest practice, not the worst weather to be dealing with today, but I think because of that, we saw an extended practice today. We saw a lot of work going on in this practice today. This is when you start to really see players that are grinding and out there battling it because, okay, this is a long one, and the coaches are not in the honeymoon phase of the first week anymore. They're out there working these guys. Things are getting more intense. The workload ramps up. The installment gets, built on. You keep stacking things on every day, and you start stacking those days together. And today was the first time I felt, okay, we're into it now.
Yeah, they had the last 2 days off, too. So there's that switch you have to flip once again following the practice on Friday night in the stadium where I thought the coaches really did a great job of generating a lot of fun and really stirring the competitiveness for the players in a situation like that. In the past, at times we've seen simply a special teams walkthrough during the in-stadium practice for the Foxborough season ticket holders, whereas on Friday night it was a real competition out there, and I think some players made significant strides, which we can get to momentarily. But after 2 days off, Saturday, Sunday, treatment, maybe weightlifting, some meeting time with coaches. Now today they go back out there in the pads, long practice, and a lot of situational work. And beyond that, Beetle, too, I think we're starting to see injuries have a toll on this team. Maybe some of them are minor, and when we have like a case with Christian Gonzalez and Carlton Davis, it certainly appears to be it's more precautionary. But we are seeing some guys go down and miss time, and with the joint practice coming up against Washington, with a preseason game later this week, and then you get into it with Minnesota immediately thereafter next week on the road. I mean, there is a real sense of urgency, I think, for a lot of these players now. Some of them are getting their opportunity because of those injuries, and others, they have that urgency to get back out there.
So we know about the Davis one. We know about the Gonzalez one. Good news was Bradbury at center was back on the field today. That was a positive one, but you're talking about other stuff that's popped up. Kendrick Bourne now dealing with an injury. And one that happened today early in the practice, which is one of the injury news pieces of this day, was not a guy that anyone was expecting to start or get significant playing time once this season begins, but a guy that I thought might be developing into a nice depth piece on this roster. That's a sixth-round pick from a year ago, a draft that I have criticized heavily. Marcel Stiles had a good camp, and he's had a lot of work and a lot of reps because those corners have been down. And so he goes down today, left leg injury. I don't want to speculate too much, but anytime you see a guy go down, stay down, and need the cart to get from where he was on the field to off the practice field and back into the facility, you kind of fear the worst in those situations. Looked like a left leg, maybe a knee thing that was going on there. And that could be one of those things where, again, they're not banking on that player, but you like to see a young player who might develop into a nice depth piece, and I feel like if that's serious, that's kind of a downer for that secondary.
And I think in his case, there was a preceding play where he might have injured himself and then went back out there, ultimately, as you said, to go down and be carted off the field. He's also a guy who last year got a lot of reps on special teams. And in the case of someone like that, late round draft pick or an undrafted free agent, that's your ticket to a roster spot. Well, now you take him out of the equation if this is going to be a long-term thing for him. And that opens a door for some of these other defensive backs who are further down on the depth chart, not only maybe to win favor as a cornerback, but also now you might get some more reps as a gunner. I think Javon Baker has been working out a little bit more, it seems to me, on the periphery, on the punt team, as both a gunner and a jammer for them. And I thought he had some good plays today. He showed up well in some red zone passing, 7-on-7 in particular. You look at him with Jalen Polk, for example, well, who's going to have the nod? It might be the guy who can give them some value in that third phase because, they're further down when you look at who's up there for them with Diggs, along with Booty and Douglas and Hollins, who certainly drew a lot of praise today from Mike Vrabel, and Kyle Williams.
That was going to be one of my questions for you, and we will get to the offense, but is there a path for Baker to make this roster? And he's put together, at least on the offensive side, with the reps he's gotten with twos against twos, he's done a decent job. He's had a camp that has surprised me on some levels because last year was just so bad. And yes, there have been some hiccups last week, making a great play, and yet 2 plays later, they're stopping because he didn't know where to line up. Right. And so some of those issues remain from a year ago. But he's caught the ball well. He's made plays. You mentioned the special teams work. I still think it's an uphill climb for him to make this team. I don't know that I see a path there for him to be on it.
I would agree, and especially if they really like Efton Chisholm and feel like they have to give him a roster spot to keep him in the fold. He has worked out as well on special teams in returning, punt returning specifically. I think he's seen more reps further up the twos rather than the threes for him. So he may be in that mix with Baker slightly ahead of him based on the fact that he's their guy. He's a player they signed and made quite a commitment to him as undrafted free agent commitments go.
So, Bob, if there's something alarming that has come out of the last few days, and granted, last couple of days have been off, but between Friday night and this practice today, the offense is in a rut. Mm-hmm. They were good out of the gate. They were impressive at times out of the gate. Now it feels like they're struggling. And that is not any one particular player. It feels like they took a step back here today.
Well, especially we're talking about defensive backs not participating. You mentioned Dial going down during the practice, but no Gonzalez, no Davis out there. And I thought they had a tough time uncovering with a lot of the red zone passing. You saw extended plays where Josh Dobbs or Drake May were moving well beyond what would have been the limit in game action. It would have resulted in a sack or at least a throwaway, but they extend plays here that we're not going to see extended in games. And so for me, that was one concern, just guys not getting open at times. The defensive backs, to their credit, some of these young guys, DJ James continues to make some plays. Crossley had a good night on Friday. I don't want to take anything away from them, but I think that is a concerning sign. And also Pete on the offensive line. We saw a lot of Marcus Bryant, the rookie, playing right tackle with the so-called twos. Ben Brown, which I thought was an interesting move. And this is a positive for him, I believe. He practiced today as a guard with the 2 offensive line, while Cole Strange was the center. And we know that Brown seemed to overtake Strange last week as a center because when Bradbury was out, it was Brown who got the 1 reps. And Mike Vrabel talked about his movement up the depth chart when the pads came on. And to me, here's a guy who now gets this opportunity. They want to see him specifically at guard because you need that swing player, the interior player who can play guard but in a pinch center. And I think back to when Teddy Karras, for example, made this team early in his career.
The guy that everyone looks at on that offensive line, though, is the 4th overall pick, Will Campbell. If we're taking stock at this moment about how his camp has gone, how would you describe it?
Uneven. I think, and you could say it's to be expected for a rookie, particularly at that position. Keon White spoke about Will Campbell today and echoed a lot of the things we've heard from the veterans in particular and the defensive guys who've gone against him. That he doesn't hang his head after he has a tough rep, that he's doing the right things in terms of his preparation, his willingness to learn, his willingness to be coachable. But it is, I think, a situation where they need him to acquit himself I don't think it's realistic to think that he's going to come in and he's going to just wall off that left side of the line. And I think Josh McDaniels is probably going to have to give him some help at times too. I think he's perhaps with both tackles. The Josh has been prone to do when he's been the play call. We didn't see it last year, of course, where they didn't allocate extra bodies. So it is an area though that I think is going to be really in the crosshairs on Wednesday versus Washington, and certainly next week when they go against Minnesota. And not only Will Campbell, but everybody on that offensive line and the quarterback, Drake May, try to decipher who's coming and who's not when they face Brian Flores' defense.
All right, so that is what they've got coming up the next couple of weeks. They will have some tests here over the next couple of weeks. They have their first preseason game coming up on Friday night. One other note from practice, defensive coordinator Terrell Williams went down in between the two fields. It happened in the back half of the practice. It went unnoticed by a lot of people and a lot of members of the media that were covering this practice. There were so many people on the sidelines today that it wasn't even made out to be a big deal, but he apparently went down to the ground. They did bring out a stretcher, and he did leave the field, but the late word on that just a few minutes ago, he's suffering from dehydration, and he's going to be okay. And so it was not anything too serious, and he's being treated and should be back out on the field shortly. But given his offseason, given the health scare that he had that made him miss a lot of what was happening with the team in the spring, obviously scary when you hear something like that, but it appears that he'll be okay.
Yeah, good news on that front for sure, but it is cause for greater concern, as you mentioned, given the past for Terrell, and you hope that he can be with this team again on tomorrow, but especially when they go up against Washington and then on the sidelines as well for the preseason opener.
Bob, that's it. You want to drop an F-bomb before we go? Or?
Well, do I have to, how much time do we have?
We're done. I mean,
that's it. Well,
this is the end of the program.
I was going to tell a story about a partner who dropped an F-bomb, but maybe I'll spare the audience that for now. I have been known to drop a lot.
Tease us like that? You're going to tease us?
So it's Navy versus Duke, early 2000s.
I love this setup.
It's the late John Feinstein. God rest his soul. John Feinstein was a Duke grad. He was in the booth with Omar Nelson, a former Navy fullback, in the middle. I was on the right side, and John was worked up that day, very emotional. He's no greater fan of Academy football than John Feinstein, who wrote the great book, A Civil War, about the Army-Navy rivalry. Well, it's late in the game. Navy has taken a late lead. Duke is driving downfield down by 8, and Duke scores a touchdown to pull within 2. And then on the next play, which is a 2-point conversion pass, the receiver clearly pushes off the Navy defensive back. It goes uncaught. I even describe it. Saw the play completely with my heart as much as my eyes. He clearly pushed off on the defensive back. You're waiting for a flag to come down. It doesn't come down. And in the Duke broadcast booth, they have blinds, metal blinds. And I said, Duke ties the game. It was a clear push-off. And the next thing I hear is this fist slamming against the blinds. And then I hear, fucking refs! And I looked at Omar Nelson, and he looked at me. And John took his headset off, put it down on the counter, got up and walked out the booth and offered to resign to the athletic director, Chet Glagic, who, to his credit, did not accept the resignation. And after a so-called reprimand, he was back at the booth the next week.
Where was that heat from Feinstein in those CBS Sports minutes?
Well,
we could have used that, Feinstein. And by the way, he is a tremendous author. I really love his Red Auerbach book.
Absolutely.
If you're, which is a good one.
with Red, was it?
No, Tell Me a Story.
Tell Me a Story.
Yeah.
It's about a weekly lunch that you had with Red Auerbach and friends in Chinatown in Washington, D.C.
Great read if you're looking for Feinstein books. He's got a bunch of good ones.
Absolutely.
I have not read the Army-Navy one.
You got to read the
I'm
going to
read it now.
Absolutely.
I'm putting it on my list
Civil War.
today. I'm going to check that one out. And again, what passion. We needed more of that. Needed more of that from Feinstein.
Do we have any more time? Or are we done?
I think we're
done.
We're only holding up everybody else. So thanks for checking us out. I'm back again tomorrow doing this. I'm good for like one F-bomb a day.
And I'm done. I've blurted
Soci's
out my
retired.
only F-bomb, I hope.
We'll get Barthy in here this week as we cover this on the Patriots training camp post wrap-up. Here's the important part. Safety insurance. Love safety insurance. Shout out to safety insurance. Bob, I just look at this is in the middle of this at 1:37. I just paid my bill. Auto withdraw. I just paid my bill. Safety insurance half hour ago. Love those guys. And we're looking forward to the broadcast of the game with Socci coming up Friday night on the Safety Insurance 98.5, the Sports Hub Patriots Radio Network.
Well said. Love Safety Insurance. Love what they're doing with Clear Path for veterans as well, in both New Hampshire and Massachusetts.
Make that donation. You get a discount on your bill.
There you go.
That's what you got to do. All right, we'll talk to you tomorrow from Gillette. Bye.